In the remote, snow-covered mountains of Japan, there is a tale passed down through generations, a story of a beautiful yet deadly spirit known as Yuki-onna, the Snow Woman. Long ago, there was a young woodcutter named Minokichi who lived in a small village near the mountains. Every day, he would venture into the forest to gather firewood, often with his father, Mosaku. One particularly harsh winter, as the snow piled high and the winds howled through the trees, Minokichi and his father set out for the forest, knowing that without wood, they would not survive the bitter cold. As they climbed higher into the mountains, a fierce snowstorm suddenly engulfed them. The winds grew stronger, and the snow fell in blinding sheets, forcing them to seek shelter. They stumbled upon a small abandoned hut and took refuge inside, huddling together for warmth. As night fell, the storm intensified, and the cold seeped into their bones. Exhausted, they soon drifted into a deep sleep. In the middle of the night, Minokichi awoke to an eerie silence. The storm had stopped, but the air was unnaturally cold. He felt a strange presence in the room and looked up to see the door slowly creak open. Standing in the doorway was a woman, unlike any Minokichi had ever seen. She was tall, with skin as pale as the snow outside, and long flowing hair as black as the winter night. She wore a white kimono that seemed to shimmer in the dim light, and her eyes glowed with an icy blue hue. Minokichi was frozen in place, unable to move or speak. The woman floated silently toward them, her feet barely touching the ground. She leaned over Mosaku, her breath turning to mist as it touched his skin. In an instant, his face turned pale and his body froze solid, as if turned to ice. Terrified, Minokichi watched in horror as the woman turned to him, but as their eyes met, she hesitated. "You are young and handsome," she whispered in a voice like the wind through the trees. "I will spare your life, but you must promise never to speak of this night to anyone. If you do, I will return and I will kill you." Minokichi, too frightened to refuse, nodded in agreement. The woman gave him one last piercing look before she vanished into the night, leaving no trace of her presence except for the lifeless, frozen body of his father. The next morning, the storm had passed, and Minokichi made his way back to the village, his father's body in tow. He was heartbroken and shaken by the encounter, but true to his word, he told no one of what had transpired in the mountains. Years went by, and Minokichi eventually married a beautiful young woman named Oyuki. She appeared in the village one winter's day, mysteriously arriving as the first snow fell. Her beauty was unmatched, and Minokichi quickly fell in love with her. They were happy together, raising a family and living a peaceful life. But as time passed, Minokichi could never shake the memory of that fateful night. One cold winter evening, as they sat by the fire, he looked at Oyuki and was reminded of the Snow Woman. The memory overwhelmed him, and before he realized it, he began to recount the story of the terrifying encounter he had as a young man. As he spoke, Oyuki's face grew pale, and her eyes turned icy blue. When he finished, she stood up, her expression a mix of sorrow and fury. "Foolish man," she whispered, her voice now cold and distant. "I am the Snow Woman you met that night. I spared your life because I loved you, but you broke your promise." Minokichi was struck with fear and regret, realizing his grave mistake. But before he could plead for forgiveness, Oyuki's form began to waver, and she dissolved into a flurry of snowflakes, leaving him alone in the empty house. From that day on, Minokichi lived in sorrow, knowing that he had lost the love of his life to his own recklessness. And though he searched the mountains and forests, Yuki-onna was never seen again. But every winter, as the first snow fell, he would feel her presence in the cold wind, a reminder of the price he paid for breaking his word.
Thank Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.